Welcome to Weird Web Radio, an explorer's guide to hidden worlds of the paranormal and occult, reality-expanding experiences, and the downright weird and bizarre. With your host, Lonnie Scott.
And Jason. It is now bonus audio time. Are you ready?
No, I'm going to go get more coffee, and then I will be ready.
Sold.
And we are ready. Well, I am ready.
You're ready?
I should probably talk about myself in the plural. I am ready.
Jason is ready. All right. First question is always the same as a general rule around here. And you've answered it once before. What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit?
Gosh, I hope I answer it the same as I did last time, or I'm lying, I guess. Probably Jim Morrison's. I need to see Jim Morrison's grave.
Yeah, same. You still haven't been there.
Still, we've never been to Paris. So yeah, I haven't been. That's high on the list. That's number one on the list.
Yeah, you might enjoy this fact. I don't recall if I ever told you. I've had enough people answer Jim Morrison to that question that I've declared Jim Morrison an official patron saint of the show.
He could be watching over. I think that would be a good thing. But it's there aren't a whole lot of rock star graves that are truly tourist destinations. And Jim's grave is one of those spots.
That's true. That is very true. All right. So I explained to you, since you are a returning guest, excuse me, that I was going to play a little QI game with you. And people who have been on Patreon are familiar with what's about to happen. But first, I have a Patreon member's question that I'm throwing into the mix. Patreon member Morgan Golden would like to know, well, in her phrase, she says, I would love to know what they found the most disturbing or shocking thing that they learned while they were working in their practice.
Wow. I don't think I've ever learned anything disturbing while I was doing witchcraft. I think I find things out about the community while being a witch that are disturbing. And, maybe these things shouldn't surprise others, but I'm disturbed by people who take advantage of their position in the craft and use it to coerce others, whether it's money and especially sex. It horrifies me still that we have problems with predators, and it always seems to be kind of middle-aged dudes who have covens of 12 women, and telling them that you have to have sex with me to be initiated as a witch and that sort of bullshit. And it makes me so angry. One of the, social media is a cause of many problems, right? It brings up divisions and it sows anger. But at the same time, it is a way to police bad actors, right? If somebody's doing that, we should all know. And it surprises me that people can still get away with that. And it horrifies me that people can get away with that.
Yeah. We had a Gardnerian priest who got involved with our grove. And thanks to a Gardnerian priestess somewhere, I got tagged inside some Gardnerian witchcraft group, and that I don't have any business being in. So they invited me in so I could see this years-long discussion about this particular person and why people should stay the hell away from him. Wasn't that a revelation?
Yeah.
So without social media, I worry to think what might have happened if the relationship had continued on. I mean, you're talking about a grove pre-COVID. We had as many as 60 people coming to our rituals.
Yeah.
So we held a large space, fertile ground for people who wanted to be those predatory assholes.
Yeah. And, and it's something, that when I go to festivals, I don't, it's like, you can't say, oh, I see this, but there are times where I'm like uncomfortable with how people act. Right. And I don't know always the full story, but you can see it like growing, and sometimes our groups can be breeding grounds for it. And if we can stop it in the bud, if we nip it in the bud, that's good.
Agreed. All right, let's get on to the QI fun. First up, for the letter J, in case anybody missed that point. Jinx, how do you feel about curses?
Certainly something that's real. Yeah. I think it's a magic that can be done. And usually when somebody curses you, kind of everything goes crazy for a little while. So there's a local witch who hates me, despises me, hates my guts. We were at the same event once, and I'm always very nice. Like, it takes a lot for me to hate somebody. So I went up and shook their hand, I was like, hey, how's it going? Trying to be really nice. And then all of a sudden, like, shit went crazy at our house for like a couple of, like, maybe a week. Just work was bad. Bad things were happening. Cats were puking more than normal. Just anything that could happen. And my wife's like, I think that person like cursed us because you touched her, right? You gave her an in to like throw bad energy at us. And she's like, you need to fix that right now, husband. So the next day I did a spell, and everything kind of got back to normal. So, but yes, I really think that you can curse and jinx people.
Agreed. Next up, justice. How involved should witches be in social justice movements?
Those are my values. I'm not going to tell somebody what to think or what to believe, but witchcraft is sort of the religion or practice of the oppressed, the others, the marginalized. And we think of social justice movements, they often revolve around the others, the marginalized. And, to me, those are our brothers and sisters, or, sometimes people who don't identify as a brother or sister, and that's fine too. So to me, those are my values. I don't like to tell somebody that they have to do something or don't do something, right? I think that's a step too far, but to say that like witchcraft doesn't have places, doesn't have a spot for everybody, to me is pretty abhorrent.
Mm-hmm. Agreed. Very well said. Next up. You good?
Yeah, I'm sorry. I just banged something on my microphone. That's all. Like a child.
Right. Next up, Jeopardy. Tell us a time that you used witchcraft to get yourself out of trouble. You can change the names and dates to protect.
Wow. I haven't really been in trouble in a long time.
Never? In a long time.
In a while. Yeah. I used it to get out of trouble. When you said Jeopardy, I was just thinking of the show, and that would make a joke about the show. But no, I can't do that now.
Have you ever used witchcraft to help someone else get out of trouble?
I will say that I remember I did witchcraft spell once because I hated my job. And I did it, and I needed a job to live, so I was in jeopardy of not having food. So I did this spell, and I got a job like 3 days later, and it wasn't the perfect job, but a year later it was the perfect job, and then I worked there for 9 or 10 years. So witchcraft has made a difference in my life. I remember we did a job spell with our coven, and I had a job. And my wife, she's the main breadwinner of the house, which is why I have time to write books. But it was like, what do you want to see yourself doing? And I imagined myself writing books, which I'd always wanted to do. And 2 weeks later, I got a job offer or a book offer from Llewellyn, unsolicited. Like, I didn't ask them to write a book. They asked me to write a book for them, and which is the direct opposite of almost everyone else's experience.
That's my experience. Isn't it a cool feeling?
It is. It really is.
It is.
And and I put that on witchcraft for sure. Trying to think. When I lived in Michigan, we used to do spells to keep our cars from being hit by deer because they were everywhere. And our car never hit a deer. And so I avoided that jeopardy. But I don't think I've ever had like sort of the life-threatening moment or something. Where we pulled out magic. We've done magic for sick people, and they've gotten better. Apparently, I needed to do magic for my cat because you can hear her in the background if you listen closely. She's going through something very traumatic that I'm not petting her enough or something.
Cats are pretty demanding when they want to be.
Yeah. So anyway, but I don't think I've ever had that like big moment. No,
that's fair. No, and all of those matter. I'm sure you'll be covering those in your giant tome of spellcraft coming out in March.
There's a lot of spells.
Next up would be jab. If you can make one thing go away from witchcraft for good, what would it be?
I would, the other, well, how do I want to say it? I mean, because I'm thinking of like 5 things right now.
Hey,
Trying to,
nobody will
I'm
complain if you
trying
get
to
more than one.
trying to include them all in my answer. I would want to get rid of space not being reserved for everyone in the circle. So that's my thing. There's a place for everybody who wants to be involved in the craft. And you see some people trying to push out different groups or different sort of folks. I mean, we saw this in the 70s, the beginning, there's no room for the homosexual in witchcraft. Well, fuck right off. There's plenty of room. And really, I don't have room for you, is the truth.
Right.
But, I see it, especially right now with our trans community sometimes, being pushed out of certain spaces. And that makes me sad. And that is what I would get rid of.
Yeah, that makes me sad. I like to think, probably very naive at times, that like witchcraft is the one practice in the umbrella of paganism, as John likes to call it, where you won't find many of those ultra conservative notions, but yet you still run into them at times.
And I mean, there's this idea, I think, sometimes that the pagan world, witchcraft, the magical world is a monolith, that everybody is a very left-wing liberal living on the coast. And I travel enough and I know better, right? I go to festivals in the South and I go to the Midwest a lot. And, I know people who voted for Trump who are witches. And I will say, you vote for Trump. I do think that you're voting to limit the rights of people. But even those Trump voters that I talk to are almost 98% of the time believe that there's a space for everybody in the circle. I mean, I don't understand why they're voting like they do, but I had a friend once. He voted for Trump. He's a cop, and he's like, Jason, I want you to know that, I mean, I vote this way, but there's room for trans people in the craft, and there's room for gay people in the craft, and there's room for people of color in the craft. There's room for everybody in the craft. So I think most of us are pretty open, but there's always that little group who are very loud.
Yeah. Well, come investigate the heathen world, my friend. There are very big, clear lines of battle drawn. Yeah, it's a real problem we deal with.
Yeah, the heathen world scares and frightens me. Between us, when I used to run Pathos and I'd hear from heathens, I'd have to do extensive background checks to see if I could let them write for the site.
Yeah, I am an ambassador and steward of the Troth, former High Reed member of the Troth. I still do background checks on people. So I get it.
Yeah,
I do. I totally get it. Maybe one day we'll get at least as far as you guys have. That would be fantastic.
We're making progress. I think.
Same. We're making progress. And honestly, I give much of the credit to that, to our current steer, Robert. He's Robert Schreier. He's a fantastic human being. Good. He does great work. And fantastic leader. So carry on, my friends. Carry on. Next up for you, Journey. Other than Salem, what's one of the most magical places you've visited? And I love that I put other than Salem in there after the beginning when you're like, it's not that magical of a place.
Yeah. Like, there goes anybody who liked me in Salem. All my books are going now. I'm glad I got to see them when I did. That's exciting.
That was exciting.
Our favorite place I think we've ever been to is we've been to England and Scotland a couple times and been to Greece too. But one of the things about going to England and Scotland is that a lot of those places are still being used by modern pagans and witches. So like if you go see the Parthenon, there's a big fence around it and people aren't doing rituals in there. It's just tourists and piles of rubble. And you go to the Long Man near Brighton in England, which is one of those big chalk drawings. And there's a lot of, disagreement on when it was put together. Like, is it something that's more modern or is it truly ancient and pagan? But Dave the Bard's Druid Grove does ritual right there. There's like a spot below it that's flat and they do ritual there. And my wife and I like went there and we're like, fuck. Like you could feel that they do ritual there, right? There are people who see the long man and are like, wow, this is really cool, and are in awe from it. And then there are people who do ritual right below it, kind of adding to that power. So that's a really great spot. The White Spring in Glastonbury, England. I love the White Spring. The White Spring is near the Chalice Well, but the Chalice Well is just sort of new agey. I mean, it kind of pays lip service to pagans, but we went there once and we saw the Wheel of the Year put up somewhere on the grounds, and they used different names. Like, heaven forbid we offend Christians by using the word Samhain. So, so it's like we're happy that you're spending your money here, pagans and witches. However, this isn't really your place necessarily. But you go to the White Spring and, there's a giant painting of the Horned God in the White Spring. And you're like, fuck, this is our place. So yeah, there's some energy there, which I really like.
That sounds
cool. So those kind of spots that mix something that's ancient or older with contemporary energy, I really love that. And I feel like I get that a lot in the UK.
For sure. Yeah. You couldn't help but get it in the UK. Just history, the immense history that they've had and all the different cultures that have visited that piece of land.
It's also kind of the birthplace of modern witchcraft too. I mean, that's, Gerald Gardner, Doreen Valiente. If that's not your flavor of craft, there's also Robert Cochrane, who's, English too. So yeah, there's a lot of that influence, and the influence of Freemasonry on contemporary witchcraft is pretty big. And, that started in the UK too. So there's a lot of that energy that's there.
Are you involved in Freemasonry at all?
Nope. Just giving their secrets away.
I dig
it. There's a lot of Masonic stuff in Transformative Witchcraft, which was my fourth book. Yeah. And, I have a friend who's a Mason, and he's like, there are things in your book I can't talk to you about, but I wish that I could.
It's already published, man.
Yeah.
Come on.
Yeah. It's like, well, that's great. Because you got some things wrong, but you got a lot of things right. I can't tell you which is which. I wish. Nice. There's a part of me that would like to be a Freemason. It's just finding the time for an extra group.
Yeah, I understand that. I mean, it's not really my thing anyway, but I get it. I like that things like that exist, as long as they're doing it in a, cool way, I guess. But
yeah.
There's still a lot of, I have friends who are Masons. There are still places in Masonry where super ultra conservative values live and breed.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
I have a friend back in Michigan who is a Republican lawyer, and I was talking about Freemasonry once, and, and how there are magical people within Freemasonry. And he's like, there's nothing magical about Freemasonry. It's a fraternal order. And I'm like, being a Mason is different things to different people. And, it's like, there's no way we would let a witch in the Masons. I'm like, well, you failed.
Yeah, joke's on you, buddy.
I know people who are in, so you've already failed. But but it's one of those things that's going to vary from lodge to lodge, for sure.
Mm-hmm. That's true. Next one up, joke. So what's something funny in witchcraft? Something you just point at and laugh. And he laughs already.
Yeah. And I think gendering one's tools is like ridiculously stupid. And when I come across it in books today, and it's still in things like Wicca by Scott Cunningham and stuff, like, this is a male tool. I'm like, well, it's a bell. Right? I mean, this cup is a female tool. It's a cup, I don't understand that. I mean, I think that's ridiculously funny that people were obsessed with that at one point, and that it was in books. And, you should have your altar divided up between male and female tools on each side. And I'm like, I'm sure some of those tools would like to intermingle with the tools on the other side. So I find, when you think about that, I find it very funny. The athame is a penis. If the athame is a penis, no one's ever going to come to it right? That's not a knife is not what I want my dick associated with. You know, it
No.
doesn't seem like a good thing. So I think like the idea of gendering tools is hilariously funny and antiquated and outdated and silly to begin with.
I like that.
There's some purist right now, some like Gardnerian purist. How dare he? How dare he?
This is the Patreon portion. I've driven the purists out, I think, at this point.
Good.
The last one I've got on here for you is jewelry. What's your favorite witchy swag?
So I wear a ring every day with a tree of life on it because we kind of adopted that as the symbol of our coven, which is called the Oak Court. It's not as pretentious as it sounds. That's just the name of the street that we live on, Oak Court. And people would say, I'm coming over to Oak Court. And eventually I was like, probably should name the coven that, I guess. So I wear that a lot. As a Gardnerian third degree, I have a third degree symbol that I like to wear when I'm doing ritual from time to time. One of my favorite artists is named Roger Klein, who used to be in the band called The Refreshments. And now he's in Roger Klein and the Peacemakers. And he found a petroglyph in the desert once, which is really a 5-pointed star. And it kind of became the symbol of the band. So I have that on like a necklace, and I love wearing that. And sometimes people will be like, oh, witchcraft, huh? 5-pointed star. And I'm like, it's a band. So, you know, it has that double meaning, which makes it really fun.
Yeah. I like it.
Yeah. And I wear a lot of bracelets with the, that are like sort of evil eye repellent on them.
You do. Yeah. Well, I mean, if you've got that one local witch who's out to get you.
Yeah, that's right. You know.
Good call. Yeah. All right, my friend. Thank you again for the extra time. I really appreciate it. I hope the listeners have enjoyed this.
It was so much fun. I was hoping you had like 5 more J words because this was great.
I could probably scoop up another 1 or 2. Well, for a bonus one, let's see here. Let's go with you got one that comes to mind?
Oh, wow.
This is what I do when I plot this stuff out. I stare at my bookshelves.
Jelly.
Jelly?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, yours is jelly. You give me a reason why jelly comes to mind concerning witchcraft, and I'll come up with one more while you answer.
Yeah. So jelly has nothing to do with witchcraft, but I'm a big fan of strawberry jam, which is my jam on toast. It's really good. You know, I don't know. One of the things, if you think about jelly, though, you spread it everywhere. And I love that witchcraft is spreading everywhere right now. And I love that, you know, it spreads in all these different ways. And like there are lots of different ways to do it. And lots of different people are doing it now. So that's great.
I'm stealing one you just said. Jam.
Yeah. Witchcraft is my jam.
It's just jam. But that comes to mind, music. So is there good witchcraft themed music out there that's current?
You know, there's a lot of pagan music, right? And it's more accessible than it's ever been in a lot of ways. I mean, if you're getting your music from Spotify or another streaming service, all of the, pagan artists are on there. And, it used to be in the 90s, you'd go into a witch store and you'd see like these 8 CDs by pagan artists with dust on them that were all $20, right? And it was like, wow, at the time there was a huge investment for not being able to hear anything on the CD. So it was a big deal. Right. But now, you can listen to it, whether it's Tuatha Dea, and Dave. I think Dave the Bard is great. I legitimately really, really like Dave's music. Sharon Knight. There's a lot of people out there that you can listen to. For me, when it comes to what I think of pagan or witchy music, I like doom metal with female singers. To me, that is sort of the height of it. Anything that sort of has an occult vibe, I think, is great. And I love the band Ghost from Sweden. Where the lead singer dresses up as a demonic pope, and it's awesome and it's great. Oh,
one of my favorite things that you guys did when you're on your Salem trip, when you and Thorn started going through all the different old chants that
We
used to be common at festivals.
Oh, she got in trouble for that. Like somebody was offended that we were making fun of those.
Oh no.
And I don't want to say that we were really making fun of them. I think we were just making fun of like how everywhere they were at one point, right? Because you just couldn't escape them. Yeah.
True.
But to me, a lot of those chants, and I know that they resonate for some people, but to me, they sound like dirges, right? I mean, it's not uplifting always, it's just,
no.
Yeah, it feels antiquated in a way, like if you're doing ritual, if you like EDM, play some EDM, everything's magical in its own way. If you like REO Speedwagon, I guess play REO Speedwagon, right? I mean, what's magical is going to vary from person to person.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
All right. I think that's where we'll end it. Music is always a good spot.
Yeah.
All right. Well, once again, man, thank you. This was a lot of fun.
Lonnie,
I like how enthusiastic you are for these questions.
I said once to somebody, authors just really like to hear themselves talk. So
yeah, I get to hear my voice this time. Yeah.
That's what it is. No, this was really fun. I had such a good time.
All right, cool. Well, everyone listening, as always, thank you for being a member of the show. Your support means a great deal. As always, tell your friends, your family, and even your familiars to come join the Weird Web Radio family. Stay weird out there, my friends. And Thorn Mooney, it is now bonus audio time. Are you ready?
Yes, I can say what I really think now.
That's right. So no, never mind. Silence. First question is always the same in Patreon for first visitors. What famous person's resting place do you most want to visit and why?
I feel like I've already done this.
You have not done this.
No, not you, but I'm not like a cemetery enthusiast per se, but I was really excited about seeing Emile Durkheim at Père Lachaise in Paris.
Who's Emile Durkheim?
Emile Durkheim, the father of sociology.
I didn't know that.
The nerdiest thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that I don't. So like there was that. Damn. A lot of my favorite people are still alive. Yeah, but Emile Durkheim.
That's good to know. I'm happy for you.
Emile Durkheim was a big deal for me. I had to hunt that out.
Mine still remains Pamela Coleman Smith. I'd like to just pay my respects and honor at that wonderful soul's grave. Not entirely sure where it is. Marcus Katz and Tally Goodwin think they hunted down the churchyard where it is, and they wrote about that in their book, The Secrets of the Waite-Smith Tarot. Not sure if it's true or not, but they think they figured it out.
Yeah. I mean, I've been to other, like I saw Dion Fortune's grave in Glastonbury. Not that I'm like a Dion Fortune enthusiast person. Like that's a whole can of worms. But it's kind of like what we were saying earlier about, Gerald Gardner and some of these other folks were like, you have to kind of tip your hat at some of these people because for all of their failings, we just objectively wouldn't be here without them.
We wouldn't know what it would be like.
Right. And sometimes it's also just like voyeurism too. Like I want to see the grave. Right. It doesn't mean that like I necessarily loved the person. Yeah. Let's just leave it at time. That was cool as shit.
That works. When you visit a grave or a cemetery, do you have any particular traditions or practices that you may do?
So I have in the past. It depends, right?
Thorn the necromancer.
I'm definitely not a necromancer. I wouldn't report any expertise there. But I did have, I am not, to be very clear, right? I'm not a practitioner of African traditional religion. But I did have an encounter with a practitioner at a ritual where I sort of inadvertently had an encounter with Oya. And I stay out of those waters. Okay. But there was definitely a period where like I would bring a gift for her and just leave it at the gates and call it that. Like, hey, thanks for that advice I accidentally got that one time when I was in my 20s. Like, please just so I've done little things like that.
I like that.
Yeah. Again, I'm not a practitioner or an authority in those spaces, and it's not my intention to like tread where I do not belong as a white lady. But like,
you had an unmistakable "this spirit is speaking to me" experience,
according to a practitioner within that tradition. And I think folks know that like maybe folks don't know, but like divination in many ATR traditions it's very organized. It's not something that just like anybody can do, right? It's initiatory.
Right. Can't just go buy the tarot deck and
right. That's not a thing.
Read from the little white book.
Yeah, it was an interpretation that came through somebody else who was a practitioner. Right. Really, really stuck with me and really impacted like some of the choices that I made in college, which is like a weird thing to say as somebody who is outside of these traditions. But like, as somebody who thinks that these spirits are real, if they come through their people, you just keep it at that.
a bone and tarot combined reading from a Quimbanda priestess completely altered the path that I took in life. Yeah. And you and I wouldn't be having this conversation if I didn't decide to take the advice.
Something comparable happened to me. I took a women's and gender studies class or whatever at a liberal arts university, and it was taught by an initiated priestess of Oshun, who said some things to me that pointed me in a particular direction. And anyway, a couple of times I've left presents at the cemetery. So there we are. But no, I like it. Yeah, I'm not an expert in these spaces at all. I will say that, so my dad is buried at Arlington National Cemetery. Okay. So I've like, when it comes to like significant cemeteries, especially in the United States, like that is a cemetery.
The history of which is kind of wild.
It's bananas. And what's cool is like when you have people at Arlington National Cemetery, they give you a pass where you can drive on Arlington National Cemetery, and I can just like bebop my way on in. And the first time I did it, I felt like I was fucking trespassing. Right. For a number of reasons. Mostly because you're trying not to kill people going to like see the Kennedy. Right. There's no like the tourists and the cars and the tour guide, like they're all sharing the same like 1-lane road. There's no MPs, right, or cops or whatever. Like you're just like, oh God, please don't kill anybody.
It's a cemetery.
This is terrifying, and it's massive, and all of the graves look the fucking same. So like just the weirdness of being there to see my dad, coupled with like, oh God, it's like the most visited cemetery in the country. Like, but over time, it's become a sacred site to me for sure. I have a lot of feelings.
I can imagine.
Cemetery, yeah. And like seeing my dad's funeral there and that sort of thing. So like, it's a funny thing. Like whether you like it or not, you end up with a relationship with the dead as you get older, one way or the other.
You do.
So we are.
There is a travel. It's categorized as a travel book that I fucking love, and I recommend it to anyone. You brought up Arlington, and it made me think of it. It's called Here Lies America. And it's the true stories behind our most beloved monuments.
Oh God.
And I didn't know how fucking crazy Arlington was.
Yeah. Arlington.
But yeah.
Y'all should
I don't want to spoil that for folks, but
go Google that.
Go Google that. And damn. Damn. It started chemical warfare in a way, biological for sure. Do you have any specific tradition or requirements you must follow? And if not, what do you intend to do with your own remains upon your death?
So this kind of blows people's minds. I don't give a shit. Yeah, like I think people expect, especially being like a high priestess, I think people expect that I'm going to have a whole lot of opinions about like afterlives, and honestly I'm not persuaded one way or the other about afterlives. I mean, like
that's my next question.
Yeah, like cosmologically most Gardnerians have perspectives, right? And I think your typical Wiccan witch believes in reincarnation, etc. I don't particularly. That's not for a reason. But I think one of the things that I've sort of come to believe, and that I don't encounter very often, I grew up in probably as close to you can possibly get to a genuinely secular household in the United States.
So did I.
Yeah, I did not grow up.
I totally get that. Yeah, I did.
Yeah. So all of it sounded equally banana pants to me, like growing up. And it's not to say that my parents are atheists. They definitely are not. My mother would be deeply offended if I was like running around talking about like my secular household. But there's a difference between people identifying as being parts of religious movements versus like raising a child in a religious space. So like I didn't meet my first Christians until I was in college. Well, I went to school in Northwest DC. You know what I mean? People aren't super evangelical. Like I didn't grow up in particularly religious spaces. I grew up around the fucking U.S. Army. My parents' religion was the U.S. of A. Right? So like the closest I get to like an afterlife is like buried with honors at Arlington National Cemetery. Right? Like, so I don't have a stake, I guess, one way or the other. I tend to be kind of a materialist, which is like, I think, not a thing in a lot of witchcraft spaces. I would really like I told you at the beginning, I'm a Dana Scully who really would love to be Fox Mulder. Sure. One of the reasons I'm so deeply interested in paranormal spaces is because like I know that people are having these experiences, right? And I believe that their experiences are real and these kind of like they have these affective and also like real world consequences for the people who hold them. I personally don't.
You did say that you have a sort of relationship with your father, right? Yeah. After you said you work with the dead. So what form does that take then if you're not so much thinking about an afterlife?
Exactly. And that's real open-ended because what I will tell you is it depends on what mood I'm in. You know, like most of the time, I'm not thinking about it. Most of the time, like he's got a space right on the ancestor altar and I'm doing offerings and I'm having conversations the way I think a lot of pagans of various kinds and witches of various kinds are doing. But if you sit me down in a corner and put a gun to my head, I'm not going to tell you. Don't. I'll cry. I'll cry and I'll probably pee on myself, right? But I don't have like definitive ideas about what that means. Am I really talking to like an embodied spirit that is objectively my father? Most of the time I don't think so. Is that because I haven't had particular experiences? Maybe. I'm open to that 100%. I don't think I know everything and I don't tell people that I do. Is it some kind of like corner of consciousness in my own mind that's connected to whatever happens to consciousness when people die? I'm open to that, right? Like, I mean, God, I'm taking classes at the Rhine Center as part of my ethnography, right? Like I'm spending a whole lot of time with parapsychologists and we're always talking about like, what even is consciousness? I'm open to all of that. I don't think that like my dad, as I knew my dad, continues to be around me in the same way that he was when he was embodied.
That's fair.
Do I know where he is? No. I hope that it's super cool and maybe I can see him again. That would be hella rad. But like, you know, and as far as like my own, when I say that I tend to be a materialist is like, you know, I have my brain and I have my body and I believe my brain is my body, right? And like, that's where thoughts happen. And if thoughts exist outside of that, I think that that's badass. I hope it's cool. You know? But ultimately, it really doesn't guide how I live my life. Like as a coven leader, I will tell people, like, you get to figure that out. Like, like reincarnation is built into the cosmology, right? There's all of these practices, and isn't it exciting? You get to build that meaning. You know, when I say I don't know, that isn't depressing, right? Like it's more like, you know, kind of this Nietzschean like if there's no God, then we get to make God. Isn't that fun? Like Plato, right? Like, I'm not deeply invested in debates over what the real is, I guess, which means that I figure when I'm dead, I'm not there anymore. Like I was there with my dad's body. I've been around bodies, and like they're not in there anymore. Like so
I agree there. Yeah.
The only stipulation I have is that I think that the funeral industry is absolutely batshit, and I hate it. I hated everything about everything I went through with my dad. I think a lot of it is a racket. I don't want to be embalmed. I would rather you just dump me in a hole somewhere, right? Toss me. I my insurance company just roll me like in a carpet in the river. Like, don't really do that. People need to drink that. But like,
they clean the water. It's fine.
Oh, it's fine. I'm dead. What do I care? But, I don't want anybody to go into debt over a funeral. I would prefer not to have a funeral purely for economic reasons.
Right.
Oh, my best friend Corvus says to go and hire an ice cream truck. Hire an ice cream truck. Everybody gets some soft serve, sing some songs, right? Play Taylor Swift, shake it off, call it a day.
There you go.
I want to do whatever's cheapest. So, I have a will. We have that kind of stuff in place. Personally, I think the makeup is fucking terrible. Don't put any fucking makeup. If I look dead, it's because I'm fucking dead. Don't stand on the coffin, because I've been to a lot of goddamn funerals, right? And everybody's always like, "Oh my god, she looks so good." No, she fucking doesn't.
No, looks pretty dead.
What are you talking about?
Yeah,
right?
Looks pretty dead.
I like my dad was buried like he was wearing his Pentagon. He was a Pentagon. My dad, like Army. Hello. But he was wearing a pin, and my mom wanted it. And she didn't want it to be buried with him. She wanted it as a keepsake. So I'm like reaching in the coffin, and I smudged the makeup on my dad's hand. And I think about that every day. And it was gross. And it wasn't gross because it was a corpse. It was gross because the makeup is fucking gross.
Right.
Anyway, those are my thoughts.
Anyway, and there you have it. Another book recommendation.
How's that for personal, Lonnie?
I like that a lot. Smudge the makeup on my dead father's hands.
So gross.
That's deep. It's either Don't Worry. I think it's Stop Worrying. There's Probably an Afterlife is the name of the book by Greg Taylor.
Okay.
And Greg runs. He's run this website, the Daily Grail, for years and years and years and years. And what Greg basically did was compiled a bunch of research about NDEs and things like that and experiences people have had all over the world in nursing homes and stuff, about the weird things that happen and the visitations the deceased has. He's compiled this all in a book, and he's saying, don't worry, there probably is something,
I mean, I hope so. I'm vain. Yeah. I like my consciousness. I think it'd be cool if I got to
Right. All right, enough about dead stuff. We're moving on. What is your favorite? Now, this can be from a movie, a whole movie, a TV show, a scene, what have you, but something cinematic moment that involved witchcraft or tarot or something that you're into. It didn't have to be accurate, just you liked it, right? Like, what's something that you really liked?
It's so hard because I feel like there's a lot.
Really? I can never think of very many. I have my favorites.
So I love movies. I watch a lot of movies. And there's a lot of things that kind of come to mind. The first thing that hopped to mind that's relatively recent is the movie A Dark Song, if you've seen that.
Oh, yeah.
So A Dark Song, just to sum it up, is about a grieving woman who hires a magician. It's set in the UK. She hires a magician to perform with her kind of like a movie version of the Abramelin rite.
Mhm.
And
Something like that. Yeah.
something like that. It's
a very long ordeal
yeah.
of days and days and days of specific ritual.
And the whole premise is that she's going to contact the HGA, right? The Holy Guardian.
Right.
People. And it's about, the movie is about grief.
Yes.
And it's about, in particular, a mother's grief. And there's a lot of stuff about them. There's stuff about the movie that I don't like, but I think overall, there's something that I spend a lot of time thinking about that shows up in pop culture pretty routinely. And there's this idea, it's this idea that magic is kind of fundamentally linked to pain. And that shows up in one of the other places I can think about where it shows up is in the TV adaptation of Lev Grossman's The Magicians.
Yes.
And one of the central themes in each season is that people with magical proclivities are people who are in pain. And that looks
right.
And I'm not saying that that's true. I'm not trying to romanticize that. But
they in that show, book, whatever, they will fuck up your view of gods if you let it.
And it's gorgeous. I'm really excited. Lev Grossman is actually coming next month to our local indie bookstore. I just got a ticket. I'm so excited.
Oh, very cool.
But all that to say, like, I spend a lot of time kind of contemplating that idea, not because I think it's true, but because I think it would be easy for an outside observer to reach that conclusion. I mean, you and I spent at least 20 minutes talking about like mental illness, right? Like,
sure we did.
A lot of the people who I know who are magicians of all kinds, yeah, they've got depression, anxiety, PTSD, they've had NDEs, right? Like, we're kind of collectively a big ass mess. You know what I mean? Yeah. I'm not trying to imply that those things are innately linked.
No, and I used to, in my younger years, think that it was a uniquely pagan thing until I just realized it's just a fact of humanity.
I completely agree. But I think that's one of the ways that we, especially when we're new to these movements, magic, paganism, occult, whatever, that's one of the things that I think we cling to. I think a lot of us come in pain. I think that's why we attract so many teenagers and young people and young women and queer folks. And you know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Like, we attract people who are in pain in the same way that I think most humans are in pain. Yeah. And a dark song is just kind of a beautifully cinematic way. There's this moment before, it's not like, it's one of the climaxes, but it's not the climax.
You're allowed to spoilers here. This is behind a paywall.
I can't do that. But there's a scene where I can't remember if she's in a circle or not, or what exactly she's doing. But it's like gold is descending. It's like a sunbeam, and there's gold, and she's weeping. And it's at this point in the movie where things have happened, and it's really just like emotional, and it always kind of hits me. And that's the moment where I think, like, what did I do to deserve this gorgeous movie? And then it, there's moments where it falls apart, right? But like,
right.
I like how that movie weaves magic with grief. Mm-hmm. I think it leaves you with things to think about at the very least. And with that said, you should also, you the listener, watch the TV adaptation of The Magicians. I think that's really, I think that's one of the best shows. It's one of my favorite shows ever.
It is.
It's very different from the books. If you've read the book, the books I think are beautiful too in their own way, but it's different. But the show I really think is just,
it's fantastic.
Let's kiss.
Yes, I loved it. Same. All right. Tell me about a time that you got yourself out of trouble anywhere along the spectrum from, no, sir, I didn't know I was speeding, to, oh, fuck, I must get out of this country. And you used magic and witchcraft to do it.
It wasn't explicitly like an act of, okay.
Go with the first story you have. You had a look on your face that suggests it's a good one.
One time I was doing an outdoor Gardnerian ritual with my coven, and the police showed up.
That's important because, as I've described Gardnerian Wicca, you all are the naked witches.
I mean, it wasn't ideal. Let me just neither confirm nor deny what Gardnerian ritual entails, but let me just say that it was not ideal. For many reasons. I was a young high priestess. It was 2 other folks who were with me. We were on private property, but it wasn't strictly speaking our private property.
And the fence is only so high? I don't really know what.
Oh, we were far enough in the woods, so like whatever.
Oh, all right.
The hubris of people in like their early 30s. I don't know how old we were. We were really too old, but there we were. Anyway, it was on the grounds of a Unitarian Universalist church. And we had a good relationship with the church, and we just, kind of pushed it a little bit far.
No permits.
Don't do this. Anyway, it was a night ritual. I guess somebody saw our headlights, I guess, when we were coming into the space, because we parked somewhere and then we had to like walk through the woods to this place that we had cleared. We'd been having circles there for ages at this point. Ages and ages. So we just really kind of had our guard down. Big mistake. But it turned out that some employees of the church were there late and they called the police because they saw. So like we are just down there in circle, and then we saw the flashlights, the cop flashlights, just like bouncing down the trail in the woods, and we were just like, oh shit. So basically trying to make ourselves like law enforcement ready, whatever that entails. And it was not a magical act. I'm not proud of this, but it did work. My best friend and initiate and fellow high priestess, Corvus.
Corvus, I appreciate your presence on this show every time you come up.
Corvus, yeah, she's the famous one. I may or may not have shoved her in front of me and said, "It's your church, you talk to them." It was like, everything, right? And she was just like, "What the fuck do you want me to say?" And I was like, "I'm like, look at me. I can't talk to people. I can barely book a podcast, right?" Corvus is much more eloquent than me. Anyway, what was so great though, and if there was ever an advertisement for like inclusivity and sensitivity training, here it is. I don't know how the fuck they trained those like Charlotte Mecklenburg police, but they came down that hill in their scary uniforms, took one fucking look at us and said, "Are you guys doing Wicca? Oh no, we're so..."
Oh shit.
I'm not even kidding. Are you guys...
Wow.
It was like they were just as scared of us as we were of them. It was like those situations where we were like, who's gonna... And like they've got guns and like we may or may not have swords and knives, right? And we're just like... But we ended up not having to say anything. They rolled in and they were like, "Oh my god, it's Wicca. We don't want to offend." The way it was so funny. They clearly like just had a training. And
nice.
Young guys, right?
Yeah.
We were like, yeah, right? And they were like, "Oh, well, somebody from the daycare was here working and they just saw you, and like, do they know you're here?" And that's when Corvus stepped in and was like, "Actually, like I'm she was also an employee at the church at the time, and she was like, oh, I didn't mean to scare them, blah 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 blah." It ended up being fine. But we were scared. We were real scared. So,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So was it magic? I don't know. Did the circle shield us?
I don't know, but it involved magic and witchcraft and trouble. So there you go.
Right. Anyway,
I like it. That's a great story.
It was the only positive interaction with police that that anybody could reasonably expect.
Nice. No, that worked out nicely. I like it. Last question is the one I steal blatantly from Tim Ferriss. If I have to do the disclaimer, just in case Tim Ferriss ever gets into the paranormal and the occult. If you could have a billboard anywhere with anything on it, guaranteed to get your message out to millions or even billions of people, what would it say and why?
I used to have this fantasy.
I thought you were going to say I used to have a billboard. No.
I thought about having a billboard, but I didn't. I had this really, really terrible ex-boyfriend this really, really atrocious, like piece of shit human being ex-boyfriend, who was a very popular musician in the town I was living in at the time. And so he was like around doing shitty things to other women like for years, and I had to watch because I was also a musician. And I used to have this fantasy where I just took out a billboard that said, "This person has genital herpes."
Oh shit.
Right. And I had this, I was like, anybody can get a billboard, right? Like, this person has, it doesn't even need to be true, but like here, I'm just like, if that's the only power that I have as like, you know, an abused like 20 something girl dating this dude in his 40s who should have fucking known better, right? Like, anyway, that would have been my billboard if you'd asked me.
You can
years and years ago.
You can get fucked up billboards in Arizona. I know a guy who got a billboard in Arizona that it's terrible, and
I opted against.
I told him as much.
Yeah,
it had a picture. I don't know how much personal detail was on there, but of his ex-wife, and said, "My wife aborted my baby."
Oh my god!
Right?
Yeah.
I told him if he ended up skinned alive on the side of a road somewhere, he earned it.
Also, both abortion and genital herpes are valid. Something like 70% of like Americans have HSV1 or HSV2. So if you have genital herpes, that's fine. But when I was like 27, I was out for blood. So that's what I think about that.
And that's fair.
Yeah. Today, honestly, I don't want a billboard. No?
What do you want?
I want more books.
More books?
Yeah. No. So like,
do you already have one cooking again? Another one?
Well, I'm trying to write a goddamn dissertation. You're into the paranormal. Maybe you should let me interview you.
You can.
Yeah. Excellent. You'll have to sign a form from my university because I'm exploiting you.
I was on Hellier. I think I signed something when I did that, and then
maybe you can.
I'm on another one where I'm hypnoptizing Michelle Ballinger for a show coming out, and
that's so cool. Oh my god!
I don't think I signed anything.
Well, maybe you can take advantage of your paranormal network. The goal is to write something scholarly that isn't exploitative and actually represents like real investigators, because most scholarly work focuses on paranormal celebrities and paranormal reality TV. So I want to look at like investigation groups and, you know, events and historical sites and that sort of thing.
I could connect you to some really fucking interesting people
who
sort of bridge these worlds, if that's what you want.
I'm not looking for anything in particular at this point, but that's gratuitous. As to billboards, I think that does raise a question about, like you said, messages. I've often wondered whether or not I have like a particular message. I think right. I think we have this attitude sometimes that like kind of goes with like individuality and autonomy, this idea that like we all have a special unique message that needs being shared, and maybe that's true. I don't know. I think a lot of people don't have messages, but I mean,
I've pulled out from consuming all of your media for years that you have a theme you've never said out loud, which to me is interpreted as ask better questions.
Yeah, I was gonna say like like if I have messages, I think that's definitely one of them. One of the hills that I will die on over and over again is that religion, and by extension witchcraft or Wicca or heathen or whatever your box is that you check, religion is not what you think it is. Right. I think people have this idea that like, and you can see it in the flippancy with which people will say, "Oh, that's not a religion, it's a practice. Oh, that's not a religion, it's a philosophy. Oh, I'm not religious, I'm spiritual. Oh, I'm not," right? Like we throw around words like religion, spirituality, secular, wit, whatever. We throw around all those words like we're all using them the same way, and we are not. And you can go back anywhere in history and you can go, "Oh shit, people are using this word differently." I guess I wish we could all just be a little bit more insecure in
I like that.
In the way that we not the way we use our words necessarily, but in the way we think about other people, because you get to call yourself whatever you want. If you resonate with particular words or terms or monikers, whatever, that's your right to pick those things. What it isn't your right to do is impose them on other people.
Yes.
You know? So like it really gets my hackles up when people are like, oh, well, witchcraft is X, witchcraft isn't blah. And I think we just don't pay attention to who we're excluding when we do that.
Yeah.
You know?
I get in
Who are we
those.
excluding?
I've been in deep discussions. Evo was one I had one of the best ones with.
I love him.
Evo and Aiden, he got into this with me once. Every once in a while I get in a mood where I want to have a discussion about what it means to be devotional versus just magical.
I like that topic too.
It's a fun one, and it takes a long time. I'll bring you back a second time. We'll just do that.
Sure. Have some wine.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes, to all of that. Yes.
Yeah, ask better questions and interrogate what you mean by what you say, and listen to what other people mean, and stop immediately being offended if somebody means something like ask people, what do you mean by that? We hardly ever do that.
I agree. And
that's what's on
I mean, in heathen spaces, like we were kind of talking about different stuff earlier, I ask people all the time, what's the bare minimum thing before it starts to become heathen?
Yeah.
If I cast a circle and call quarters and I haven't done anything necessarily heathen yet, but I call Odin or Freya, is it heathen now?
Right.
And and some assholes will say, no, it's Wicca true, which is the stupidest fucking word in the heathen language, and it's insulting. Stop using it. Others will just say, no, it's witchcraft with, called on heathen gods. And then other people I will say, yeah, it's heathen enough. You want to call yourself heathen, call yourself heathen.
Yeah, I always like to, and I think about this, we do this in history. One of the things that witches in particular do, witches are obsessed with us. We love going back through history and insisting that other things are witchcraft and other people are witches.
I've noticed that.
And I look, whatever, but it feels a little bit like a particular weird kind of imperialism, like some kind of weird historical, something it feels like,
yeah,
if you're was your ancestor a witch, or was your ancestor something else that you want to call witchcraft because it legitimizes what you're doing now?
Right.
And I feel like that's a thing, right? Like Alex Sanders did it, right? Like Robert Cochran did it. We've been doing it the whole fucking time, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's a legitimacy tactic, right? And I'm not saying that there aren't family traditions. Before anybody comes for me, I'm not saying that there's no such thing as ancient witch, whatever. I don't actually care about that. I'm not a historian, as I said. I'm interested in contemporary practice. But if you're looking at some kind of indigenous practice somewhere and you're going, look, it's just like Wicca, right? Or look, those people were witches. I mean, people have been doing it to the victims of Salem for ages. It's just maybe hit pause.
Mm-hmm.
These people were actually doing this thing, and I'm the authority because I'm a wise modern person who's educated, right? I don't know. People listen to the words that people actually use to apply to themselves and the context in which they lived, and maybe show some respect. It's just,
I agree.
That's my only thought.
And that's the next billboard. All right. So, all right. That is a wrap on the Patreon portion of the show. Thank you so much for giving us extra time, Thorn.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate y'all for having me.
Absolutely. And for everyone here listening, thank you for being here. Thank you for being a member. Your support means a lot. So please go tell your friends, your family, and even your familiars to spread the word of the Weird Web Radio family. And stay weird out there, my friends. Do you want to hear how they just answered that question? What famous person's resting place would you most like to visit? That and many others, including what they think about the afterlife, what they may or may not do in cemeteries, what are their traditions, magical practices that have to do with the dead, folklore that surrounds their homes, and so much more, available for only $5. $5 a month. Even if I make more than one episode in a month, it's still just $5 a month at patreon.com/weirdwebradio, or go to weirdwebradio.com and click join the membership. You can find me on Instagram at weirdwebradio. You can find me on Facebook as Weird Web Radio, or come join the new, fun, and exciting Weird Web Radio Facebook group. Thank you again for being here. Stay weird out there, my friends.